Poor girl begs doctor to save mom. Millionaire CEO sees who's inside and collapses in shock. It was raining hard, the kind that washes everything out of the streets and turns city noise into distant hums. The hospital's sliding glass doors opened with a gust of cold air, letting in a soaked little girl. Her coat clung to her frame, 2 sizes too big, and her hair stuck to her cheeks in thick wet curls. She looked about 6. Too small to walk in alone. But she did. Alone. She held a crumpled tissue in one hand and clutched a cheap plastic purse in the other. The kind given away with coloring books at the grocery store. She wasn't crying at first. Just walking quickly. Determined. Then her eyes landed on a nurse, and everything crumbled. "Please," she gasped, pulling on the nurse's sleeve. "Please help my mom. She won't wake up." The nurse turned immediately, dropping the chart she was holding. "Where is she, sweetheart? Where's your mom?" "She's outside. In the taxi. She's not talking. She has blood here." The girl pointed to her temple. She fell. The nurse called for a gurney and waved at security. 2 attendants rushed out, and a second nurse took the little girl's hand, gently trying to guide her inside. "No. I need to go with her." "You will," the nurse said softly. "But let the doctors take her first. We'll go right after." Inside, a man in a navy suit paused by the vending machine. He hadn't touched the bottle of mineral water in his hand. His tie was perfect, his shoes untouched by the rain. He looked like he belonged at a stockholder meeting, not here. That was Julian Voss. The hospital administrator had been trying to get a signature from him for 20 minutes now. But Julian was distracted. The little girl's voice cut through the noise of the corridor. She reminded him of something. Something specific. A night, 10 years ago. In a kitchen that smelled of burnt toast and warm tea. He shook the thought off. He hated hospitals. They stank of bleach and unsaid things. Still, he kept watching as the girl was led to the waiting area. She sat on the edge of a plastic chair, feet not touching the ground, hands wringing her purse like it held the answers to everything. The past returns without warning. 15 minutes later, Julian was headed toward the elevator when he saw the stretcher. A woman lay unconscious, blood matted in her hair. The edges of a grocery uniform stuck out beneath the hospital sheet. She looked older, thinner, but the shape of her face hadn't changed. Julian froze. It couldn't be her. But it was. Mira. He took a step back, bumping into a nurse. His throat felt tight. He couldn't hear what the doctor was saying. He only saw her face. This woman once gave him a couch when he had no roof over his head. She fed him pasta with too much garlic and once pawned her necklace to pay for his antibiotics when he couldn't afford them. And he left. Worse, he left without saying goodbye. The weight of that single act hit him like a wave. All the years he'd spent pushing it away, burying it under press releases, IPOs, product launches, and billion-dollar talks. They collapsed in this hallway under flickering fluorescent lights. He sat down hard on the edge of a bench, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, forehead in his hand. No one noticed. Not yet. But he felt it. Shame. The kind that doesn't yell, just sits quietly and makes you feel small. She's alone, isn't she? A nurse walked past him with a clipboard. He stood and stopped her. The little girl. The one who came in with the unconscious woman. Is she alone? The nurse blinked, surprised. Her name's Amara. She came in with her mom, Mira. No guardian. The cab driver brought them in. Said the kid flagged him down on the street. Julian didn't answer. He looked toward the waiting area again. The girl was trying to open a packet of crackers. Her hands were shaking. Has anyone contacted family? We're trying. We've called a number we found in the woman's bag, but it's disconnected. The nurse moved on. Julian stood there for another few seconds before walking over. The first real conversation. "Hey," he said, careful not to startle her. She looked up. Big brown eyes. Tired, red-rimmed. But alert. "My name's Julian. I saw what happened. Is your name Amara?" She nodded. Her voice was small. "Are you a doctor?" "No. Just someone who's here." She nodded again, unsure. He sat in the chair next to her, not too close. "Did you eat anything today?" She shook her head. "I have crackers," she said. "But I'm keeping them. In case they don't feed my mom. He looked at the crushed plastic packet in her lap. Half-cracked, almost powder now. I can get you something from the cafeteria. Do you want a sandwich? She hesitated. I don't have money. I do, he said. It's okay. She studied his face for a long time before answering. My mom says not to take food from strangers. He nodded. That's smart. There was a long silence. Then she said, but you're not a stranger if you're here for her. He looked at her then, really looked. She had Myra's jawline, Myra's nose. Same quiet fire behind the eyes. I used to know your mom. A long time ago. Emergency room noise doesn't cover guilt. Julian bought her a grilled cheese sandwich and a juice box. He didn't sit across from her in the cafeteria. He sat next to her, just in case she got scared. She didn't. Instead, between bites, she told him her mother works 2 jobs, one cleaning an office at night, and one as a grocery cashier during the day. Julian's chest tightened. He remembered Mira telling him once, all I want is a little house with a yellow kitchen. Nothing fancy. Just a place where Amara can do her homework and sleep without hearing traffic. He remembered saying something dumb like, you'll get it. You're strong. Then he left. Not for good reasons. Not even bad ones. He left because success started calling. And he didn't want to bring his past into the rooms he was trying to enter. Now here was the past, 6 years old, in sneakers that lit up when she tapped her feet, asking, is my mom going to die? Julian didn't know how to answer. He looked at the tray instead. The doctors are doing everything they can. Back in the ER, the mood had shifted. A nurse rushed past with a cart. A code was announced overhead. Julian and Amara both turned. She dropped her sandwich. Is that for my mom? Julian didn't know. But her panic was real. He stood and held out his hand. Come with me. We'll find out. She didn't take his hand. She just walked beside him, fast. Silent. Outside the doors, a nurse stopped them. Are you family? Julian hesitated. I'm with her daughter, he said. The nurse looked at the little girl, and then at him. After a beat, she opened the door. Inside, doctors moved with speed. Beeping. Shouting. Controlled chaos. On the table, Mira lay still, her face pale, her body wired up. One doctor was shouting about hemorrhage pressure. Another about losing time. Julian stepped forward. His eyes didn't leave her. A doctor turned and blocked his path. Sir, you need to leave. Julian didn't argue. He turned back to Amara, who now stood frozen near the door, fists clenched. She whispered, barely audible. That's my mom. She's all I have. Julian nodded, not trusting his voice. Inside that room, a woman he once abandoned fought for her life. Outside, the girl he didn't know existed clung to the only thread she had. For Julian, this wasn't just a hospital anymore. It was a chance he didn't deserve, but one he couldn't ignore. The sound of the hospital doors sliding shut echoed louder than it should have. Julian stood just outside the ER, phone in hand, but he wasn't checking messages. He was staring through the glass where Mira lay, still unconscious, tubes running from her mouth, machines blinking with measured rhythm. He wasn't supposed to feel this much. Not anymore. It had been years. The last time he saw her, Mira had been sitting on a plastic kitchen chair, holding a chipped mug with both hands. He had just landed his first big funding deal. Everything changed that night. And he left. Julian used to be broke. Not struggling, flat out broke. Sleeping in a storage unit for 3 weeks until a friend of a friend gave him Myra's number. She was looking for a roommate, or more accurately, someone to split rent and not be a creep. He moved into her 1-bedroom apartment. Slept on the couch. He didn't know how to cook, but she always made extra. Cheap meals. Eggs and rice. Lentils with flatbread. She never judged. Never asked for much. When he got pneumonia, Mira took 3 days off from work to make sure he didn't choke in his sleep. She bought medicine. Paid for his doctor visit. Said, I'll figure out rent later. Julian never paid her back. When the money started coming in, that first contract, the investor meetings, the endless travel, he promised himself he'd send her something. Flowers, maybe a thank you card. He didn't. Instead, he ghosted. Blocked her number. Changed phones. Told himself she'd be fine without him. He was wrong. Back in the waiting area, Amara was coloring again. Someone had given her a coloring book and a box of dull crayons. She gripped the red one so hard it snapped in two. Julian sat nearby, watching her carefully. "I think the nurse said your mom is in surgery now," he said gently. She didn't look up. "Do they fix her in there?" "They're trying." Amara nodded slowly. "She's strong. She always says we're tough girls." Julian smiled faintly. Mira had said that exact line to him once. He cleared his throat. "Do you have anyone else? Anyone coming to be with you?" "My uncle said he'd try, but he lives in Detroit. He has a baby." She shrugged. "Maybe grandma, but she has breathing problems. She doesn't leave the house." So that was it. This kid had no one here. Not really. Julian looked down at his phone. Dozens of missed messages. His name was in the news again. Something about market speculation, a product leak, the usual chaos. But none of it mattered here. He silenced the phone. Julian walked to the front desk. The receptionist was typing, clearly overwhelmed. He waited. She didn't look up. "Excuse me," he said. She finally glanced at him. "That woman who came in with her daughter. Miracon. What do we know?" The receptionist frowned. "Are you family?" Julian hesitated. "No. But I'm here with her daughter. She's alone. I want to help. Whatever that means." The woman glanced at the monitors. "Hold on." She tapped around on her screen. She was unconscious when they brought her in. Severe head trauma from a blunt impact. Paramedics said she likely fell, possibly pushed. There were signs of struggle. Purse was missing. No ID except for a phone and a photo of her daughter. Julian nodded. "Can I see the photo?" The woman turned the screen slightly. A small worn picture, Mira and Amara sitting on a park bench, smiling. It looked old. Was she attacked? They're not sure. Police are coming to take a statement. But the fall was bad. Brain bleed. They're doing what they can. Julian walked back to Amara. She was now tearing a napkin into small pieces, making tiny paper stars. He sat down again. "I used to live with your mom a long time ago," he said, choosing his words carefully. "She helped me when I had no one." Amara looked up. "Did you help her back?" He looked at her, startled by the question. "No," he admitted. "I didn't." She nodded, like she expected that answer. "She helps a lot of people. One time she gave my coat to another kid on the bus. I got mad because it was pink and I liked it. But she said the other girl needed it more. Then she bought me a new one the next week, even though we didn't have money." Amara wiped her nose with her sleeve. "She's always tired. But she never misses bedtime. We do this thing, where she tells me one real story and one made-up one. Then I guess which one's fake." Julian smiled. "Which kind does she tell better?" "She's good at both." Hours passed. Julian bought Amara another sandwich. He told his assistant to clear the next 2 days of meetings. For once, nobody asked why. In the late afternoon, the same nurse from earlier approached. "She's out of surgery," she said. "But she's in critical care now. Intubated. She's not conscious." Amara immediately stood. "Can I see her?" The nurse knelt down. "Not yet, sweetie. But soon. She's resting." Amara turned to Julian. "Is she dying?" The nurse didn't answer. Julian did. "She's fighting." Amara nodded. "Then she'll win." Julian's private call. Later that evening, Julian stood near the vending machines again. Alone. He finally made a call he'd been avoiding. "Elliot," he said when his lawyer answered. "I need you to set up a private trust. No names attached. Start with 2 million. I'll increase it later." "Who's it for?" Julian didn't answer right away. "A woman who once gave me a place to sleep. Her daughter's 6. They need everything." "Do they know it's from you?" "No. And I want it to stay that way." "You're being generous." "No," Julian said flatly. "I'm trying to fix something I broke." At midnight, Julian sat with Amara again. She had finally fallen asleep curled in a chair, using his jacket as a blanket. A nurse walked over. "She's stable," she whispered. "Still unconscious." but she made it through the surgery. Julian exhaled slowly. She's a fighter, he murmured. The nurse paused. She was asking for someone when she first came in, before she passed out. Julian looked up. Who? The nurse checked her notes. She kept saying Jules, over and over. Julian froze. Nobody called him that anymore. Nobody except Mira. Morning in a hospital feels different than outside. It doesn't start with birds or alarms. It starts with machines beeping and shoes squeaking on polished floors. Fluorescent lights don't rise like the sun. They just flicker on and stay that way. Julian was already awake when the nurse brought coffee. He hadn't gone home. He hadn't even left the floor. Amara was curled up in the chair beside him, her small arm draped across the coloring book she'd been using as a pillow. She stirred a little when the nurse placed a juice box on the table. Any change? Julian asked. The nurse gave a small shake of her head. Still unconscious, but stable. Stable. The word felt too thin to carry the weight it was given. An hour later, Amara blinked awake. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes, still half dreaming. Julian offered her the juice. You okay? She nodded, then looked around. Did Mommy wake up? Not yet. Amara reached into her little purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She smoothed it on her lap. It was a drawing, one she must have done earlier. A house with a yellow roof, a garden with flowers, stick figures. 2 people. One big, one small. That's me and her, she said. We were gonna plant real flowers when we move. Marigolds and sunflowers. She says sunflowers always turn toward the light. Julian stared at the picture for a moment. Did she ever talk about someone named Jules? Amara tilted her head. She used to. When I was little. I thought Jules was a story, like the Tooth Fairy. Then one day I asked if Jules was real, and she got quiet. What did she say? She said Jules was a mistake, but not the worst one. Julian didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. They let Amara stand at the edge of the ICU room that morning, just for a few seconds. She wasn't allowed in, but the nurse wheeled Myra's bed toward the glass. Amara stood silent. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She just whispered, "That's her." Julian stood beside her. There were machines everywhere, breathing support, heart rate monitors for bags. Amara's fingers pressed against the glass. She's cold. No, Julian said quietly. The machines help her stay warm inside. She's not alone. She looks like she's floating. Julian didn't know what that meant, but somehow it was exactly right. Back in the waiting room, Julian pulled out his phone. He checked email, ignored everything. Then he turned to Amara. Do you want to tell me one of your mom's bedtime stories? Amara looked at him, curious. You want me to tell you one? Yeah. She thought for a second. There's one about a girl who lives in a house made of music. Her floors are drums. Her stairs are pianos. Her windows sing when the wind blows. Julian leaned back. Sounds like a noisy house. She likes it, Amara said. Because when it's loud, she doesn't feel alone. Julian blinked. He wondered how many nights Mira had come up with stories like that. Stories that said everything she couldn't say aloud. You're good at remembering, he said. She tells them a lot. Especially when the fridge doesn't work or when we can't pay for heat. Julian glanced down. She ever say she regretted being your mom? Amara didn't even blink. She says I'm the best thing that ever happened to her. Julian stepped out to make another call. First to his assistant, Liv. Liv, I need a private team to monitor someone's recovery. Neurologist, physical therapist, long-term case manager. Quietly. No branding. Got it, she replied. Can I ask who? Not right now. He hung up and called Elliot again. Add another $1 million. And find a modest house. 2 bedrooms. Garden space. Near a decent school. It needs to be deeded in Mira Khan's name, no strings. You're serious about this, Elliot said. Very. What happens when she wakes up and finds out? She won't, Julian said. It'll just be there. By noon, 2 officers showed up at the nurse's station. A female officer gently approached Julian. You're with Mira Khan's daughter? Yes. We'd like to speak to the girl if she's comfortable. Julian hesitated. She's 6. We'll keep it simple. He brought Amara over. The officer knelt down. Hi, sweetie. Can you tell us what happened to your mom? Amara's voice was small. She told me to stay inside. But I was looking through the window. I saw a man push her. He took her bag. She hit her head on the stairs. She didn't get up. Did you see the man's face? Amara shook her head. Was he tall? Did he have a beard? I don't know, she whispered. It was raining. The officer nodded. Thank you. That helps. She gave Amara a sticker before she left, a gold star. Amara stuck it to the side of her juice box. Julian asked the nurse if he could see Myra's belongings. They handed him a small plastic hospital bag. Inside were her phone, screen cracked, a wallet with $15 and a library card, a hair tie, a folded list titled February Budget, Groceries and Utilities. He unfolded it. It was handwritten. Rent due, $945. Electricity, overdue. Groceries. Try to keep it under $60. At the bottom in scribbled cursive. March goal, save $20 for Amara's school shoes. Julian stared at it. He folded it carefully and put it back. Later that evening, the nurse came running. She spoke. Julian and Amara stood up instantly. She opened her eyes for a few seconds. Said 2 words. What did she say? Julian asked. The nurse smiled gently. She said, my daughter, then went back under. Amara didn't speak. She just pressed her hands together like she was holding something invisible and closed her eyes. The monitors kept ticking. A steady pulse, 1 beat at a time. Myra's eyelids fluttered twice before they finally opened. Not fully, just enough to bring in the dim ICU light and the blurry shape of someone standing at her bedside. A nurse stepped closer, checking her vitals. You're okay. You're in the hospital, she said softly. Myra blinked. Her lips moved. No words came out. The nurse squeezed her hand gently. You've been out for a few days. You had a fall. But you're safe now. She nodded, slow and shaky, like even that simple movement drained her. Is Amara? She whispered, barely audible. She's safe, the nurse said. She's right here at the hospital. She hasn't left. Myra's hand relaxed just slightly. Outside the room, Julian and Amara sat in the hallway. It had been a long night. Neither of them had slept much. Amara had a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and was chewing on the corner of a cracker. Julian had asked about 5 times if he should call someone, a relative, a family friend, even a teacher, but Amara kept giving the same answer. There's no one else. When the nurse stepped out and gave them a small nod, Julian stood. You want to go first? He asked. Amara clutched her blanket tighter. I'm scared. He didn't press. Okay. He followed the nurse inside quietly. Myra was awake. Her eyes were open, though still unfocused. The oxygen tubes had replaced the ventilator, and her hair had been tied loosely to the side. She looked thinner, tired, but alive. Julian stepped into her view. Myra blinked again. Her gaze sharpened, then froze. Jules. He swallowed. Yeah, it's me. Silence. Myra looked like someone trying to remember a bad dream that turned out to be real. Her lips parted again, dry and cracked. What are you doing here? He stepped closer but didn't sit. You were brought here after the fall. Your daughter, she found help. She got you here in time. He paused. I've been with her since. Myra's expression didn't change. If anything, it hardened. Why? Julian hesitated. There was no script for this. Because you mattered. And I never said that before. I never said anything really. You disappeared. I know. You took everything you learned from me and used it to disappear. Not just from me. From the kind of life that gave you a second chance. I didn't know how to come back, he admitted. You didn't try. Julian sat down slowly in the chair beside her. I didn't expect to see you again. Honestly, I thought you might hate me. I did, she said. I still might. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. He looked at his hands, then back at her. I owe you everything. Myra gave a faint, bitter smile. I didn't help you for payback. I know, but it doesn't make the guilt lighter. Mira looked away, her eyes drifting toward the small window at the corner of the ICU. How's Amara? She's amazing. Smart, strong. Just like you. She shouldn't have had to do this alone. She wasn't, Julian said quietly. Not anymore. The nurse knocked gently on the door. She's awake. You can come in. Amara stepped in cautiously, holding her blanket and a small paper drawing. Mom. Mira turned her head slowly. Amara stopped halfway. It's really you? Yeah, baby. I'm here. Amara rushed forward, gently wrapping her arms around her mom's side, careful of the wires and tubes. Mira winced slightly, but her hand moved to stroke her daughter's hair. I missed you, Amara whispered. I missed you too. They stayed like that for a few minutes, not speaking, just holding. When Amara finally pulled back, she handed her the folded drawing. It's us. And the garden. I told him we're gonna have sunflowers. Mira opened the paper with shaky hands. She stared at it for a long time. Julian didn't say anything. Later, once Amara stepped outside to use the restroom, Mira looked back at Julian. You stayed. I couldn't leave her alone. Mira nodded slowly. So what now? I don't know. She looked at him sharply. What do you want? I don't want anything from you, he said. I want to help. If you'll let me. Mira closed her eyes. Help costs something. Always has. Not this time. She opened her eyes again. Do you think showing up after 6 years makes it right? No. Nothing makes it right. But maybe it makes a few things less wrong. Why now? She asked, her voice still hoarse. Why not 2 years ago, when I was taking double shifts and couldn't afford Amara's asthma medication? Julian looked pained. Because I was selfish. Because I told myself I couldn't look back. Mira let out a breath, almost a laugh. And now? What changed? Your daughter looked me in the eye and asked if I was the reason you were alone. The nurse returned with medication. Mira winced as she shifted slightly. Julian stood. I should give you space. She didn't say yes or no. As he walked toward the door, she said quietly, You were good at running, Jules. But you were never good at staying. He turned. I'm trying to change that. We'll see. Julian sat with Amara near the vending machines again. She leaned against his side, sipping juice. She didn't say anything for a while. Then, is she mad at you? Yes. Are you gonna leave again? He looked at her. Do you want me to? She didn't answer right away. Then no, not yet. The next morning, Julian sat in his car, engine running but unmoving. He called Elliot again. Make sure the house papers are signed off before end of week. Have the title transferred anonymously. And the trust paperwork too. You sure she'll accept? She won't know it's from me. That's the point. You could just tell her. She's not ready. And this isn't about me feeling better. It's about her not worrying anymore. All right. I'll make it happen. Julian hung up. Back inside, Mira was sitting up in bed now, her voice steadier. Amara sat beside her, showing her the storybook Julian had bought from the gift shop. Julian watched from the hallway. Didn't interrupt. He wasn't ready to sit inside that room just yet. And maybe she wasn't ready to let him. But he'd stay. Until she was. He stepped outside for air. Rain was falling again. The kind that makes the sidewalk shine like mirrors. He didn't walk away this time. He just waited. Myra's body was healing faster than expected, but that didn't mean she felt whole. A week had passed since she first opened her eyes. Her stitches had been removed, the bruising faded, and the breathing tube was long gone. But every time she looked out the window, she didn't see the skyline, she saw the alley. The one she was dragged into. The sidewalk where she hit her head. The blank stares of people who walked past without stopping. Recovery wasn't a checklist. It was moments like this, staring at nothing and breathing through it. Amara was her constant through it all. Every morning she showed up with 2 things. A new drawing and a new story. The last one was about a flower that only bloomed near people it trusted. Mira smiled even when it hurt. That little girl had waited outside an emergency room alone. She shouldn't have had to. Mira knew that truth too well. What she didn't know was that someone else had been waiting too. Someone who now refused to leave. Julian had become a daily fixture at the hospital. Not loud or demanding, just there. He never made a big show of it, and he never tried to act like he belonged. He brought breakfast some mornings, gave Amara rides when the bus lines were late, even helped the nurses carry things once or twice. It was strange seeing him this way, humble, almost quiet. But Mira didn't trust it. He'd vanished once, and people who leave usually don't stay gone without a reason. She couldn't decide if he'd come back out of guilt or boredom, or both. Still, she watched him closely, sometimes through the small ICU window, sometimes through Amara. And every time, it chipped away at the wall she'd built to forget him. It arrived quietly, folded inside a hospital folder labeled Discharge Planning. Mira almost didn't see it. Inside was a packet of documents from a legal firm. It read, "To Ms. Mira Khan. This is to inform you that, as of today, a residence located at address redacted has been purchased under your name. All taxes, utilities, and property maintenance costs have been prepaid for the next 15 years through an established anonymous trust. You are under no legal or financial obligation. This is a private and non-conditional donation." Attached was a photo of a small single-story home. 2 bedrooms, fenced yard, and yes, a garden. The kind Mira used to point at during walks and say, "That one feels like home." Her hands trembled as she reread the letter. No names, no clues, only one sentence at the bottom. "This is yours." No catch, just peace. Mira stared at the house photo for a long time. Her first instinct was suspicion. Nothing this permanent came without a catch. Then she thought of Julian. She hadn't asked him for anything, but he had been around just long enough to hear Amara talk about gardens and yellow kitchens. She turned to the nurse and asked if Julian was still in the hospital. He stepped out for a call. "Should I send him in?" Mira nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I need to talk to him." Julian walked into the room a few minutes later. Mira was sitting upright now, holding the envelope in her lap. The expression on her face wasn't hostile, but it wasn't soft either. She gestured to the papers without a word. "You know anything about this?" she asked. Julian didn't blink. "Yes. You gave me a house." "I didn't give it to you," he corrected. "It was arranged through a trust. You won't see my name on any paperwork. You'll never owe anything. It's yours. That's it." Mira exhaled slowly. "Why?" He didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer but kept his hands in his coat pockets. "Because when I had nothing, you gave me your couch, your food, and your time. You didn't ask for anything. You never made me feel like I was a burden. You treated me like I mattered, before anyone else ever did." He paused. "And I repaid you by disappearing." Mira looked at him for a long time. "You think buying me a house fixes that?" "No," he said. "It doesn't fix anything. But maybe it stops it from getting worse." Mira didn't answer right away. She picked up the papers again, flipping through the details. "It's not the money," she said finally. "It's the fact that I didn't get to choose. Again." Julian frowned. "What do you mean?" "When people leave and then show up with something shiny, they forget what it feels like to be on the other side. You get handed something and suddenly you're expected to be grateful, like your pain got bought out." He stayed quiet. "I didn't ask for a handout," she added. "You didn't," he agreed. "And you don't owe me gratitude. I'm not here for that." Mira tilted her head. "Then what are you here for, Jules?" He looked at her honestly. "I'm here because your daughter shouldn't grow up thinking everyone disappears. I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can stay this time." That afternoon, Mira was wheeled into the small outdoor garden on the rehab floor. First time she'd left the ICU level. Julian pushed the chair. Amara skipped ahead with a packet of birdseed she got from a nurse. It wasn't much. A few trees. 2 benches. But it felt real. The kind of space where you could breathe. "You remember that night you burned the rice?" Julian asked. Mira smiled faintly. "I remember you trying to fix it with ketchup. Still the worst thing I've ever eaten." They both laughed quietly. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't forced either. Amara turned around. "Can we go to our new house when you're better?" Mira looked at her daughter. "Yeah," she said softly. "Yeah, we can." Later that evening, Mira sat up in her bed, staring at her reflection in the small mirror on the side table. Her face looked different now. Not just tired, changed. There were bags under her eyes, a scar above her brow, and something else. Wait. Years of holding everything together alone. She opened her phone. Her screen background was a photo of Amara at age 4, wearing a paper crown and a hand-me-down sweater. She almost deleted it, but didn't. Instead, she opened her contacts. Julian's number wasn't there. She typed it in, paused, then deleted it again. Some things needed more time. Before bed, Julian sat alone in his apartment for the first time in days. It felt colder than usual. The city lights outside blinked, but the room was silent. He opened his phone and wrote a message. To Mira. I know a house doesn't make up for anything. I just didn't know how else to show that I was listening this time. If you don't want me around, I'll step back. But I'll never disappear again. Not from her. Not from you. Not unless you say so. He stared at it for a long time, then hit delete, and sat quietly, not knowing what came next. That it didn't feel real until they stood at the gate. Amara clutched her backpack, bouncing on the tips of her shoes. Mira stood still, holding the key in her good hand. Her other arm was still in a soft sling from nerve damage, a reminder of how close she'd come to losing everything. The house wasn't big. 1 story, white siding, a small porch with cracked wood that needed paint. But the door was a soft yellow, almost exactly the color Amara had used in her drawings. Mira swallowed hard. Amara looked up at her. Mom, you okay? Yeah, she said. I just haven't had a key to anything that was really mine in a long time. She unlocked the door slowly. The lock clicked with a smooth turn. The smell of fresh paint hit them first, then something faintly floral. Maybe the cleaning spray they used before closing. Inside, the living room had wide windows, cream walls, and a narrow hallway that led to 2 small bedrooms. The kitchen had older appliances, but someone had left a ceramic bowl of plastic fruit on the counter. Everything was clean, quiet, still. I get to pick my room, right? Amara asked, already peeking down the hall. Of course, Mira said, watching her disappear around the corner. But she didn't move. Not yet. She stood in the middle of the living room and let herself feel it. Stillness. Not survival. Not crisis. Just quiet. Amara picked the room with the window that faced east. She wanted to wake up with the sun. She said it like she'd read it in a book and believed it without question. She placed her stuffed rabbit on the pillow, unpacked 2 books, and sat on the bare mattress cross-legged. This is mine, right? She asked. Mira nodded. All yours. No landlords. Nope. No knocking on the wall when I play music? Mira smiled. Not unless it's really loud. They both laughed. Then Amara whispered, Are we really staying here forever? Mira didn't answer right away. She walked to her daughter and sat beside her on the bed, arm wrapped gently around her back. I don't know what forever means yet, she said. But we're not running anymore. Julian hadn't called since the day Mira was discharged. He helped carry her things to the cab. He waited at the curb. He even waved as they pulled away. But he didn't follow. He hadn't texted, hadn't sent flowers, not even a message. And somehow, that made Mira more uneasy than if he had. She wasn't sure what it meant, whether he was respecting her space or just disappearing again. Part of her wanted to call and ask. Another part didn't want to need anything. She made dinner from canned soup and frozen breadsticks. Amara didn't mind. She danced around the kitchen while it heated up, still in the clothes she'd picked herself that morning. Mira leaned against the counter and watched her daughter, alive, safe, spinning in circles. The food didn't matter. The quiet did. 3 days after moving in, a box appeared on the porch. No return label. No markings. Just her name, written in neat black letters. Mira almost didn't open it. But curiosity won. Inside, a set of sketchbooks, a bundle of fine-tipped pens, a note. You told me once you stopped drawing because there was no time. I hope now there is. Mira stared at the note for a long time. She didn't remember ever telling him that. Not directly. Maybe in passing. Maybe one of those tired, half-spoken confessions from years ago. But he remembered. She put the sketchbooks on the small dining table. Left them there all day. Didn't touch them. Not yet. The next morning, Mira stood in front of the fridge and realized they had exactly 3 things inside: eggs, milk, and 2 apples. She hadn't had time to shop, and there was no income yet. The trust covered the house, but not groceries, not clothes, not gas. She wasn't working. She wasn't cleared to lift more than 5 pounds. She debated calling a friend, but she didn't really have any close ones left. Time had a way of pruning people from your life, especially when survival was your full-time job. Her pride itched. She wasn't used to taking. She was used to working double shifts, patching shoes with glue, bargaining with utility companies. But now she was a mother in a quiet house, with a kid who deserved cereal and stability. She sat down at the table and stared at the sketchbook again. She flipped it open, drew a line, then another. By the time Amara came into the kitchen, her mother had drawn a window, one that looked exactly like the one in her new room. Julian didn't call. He just knocked. Mira opened the door surprised. He was standing there, holding a bag of groceries in one hand and a brown envelope in the other. "I figured you might not want to see me," he said. "You figured right," Mira replied. He nodded. "Can I just leave these here then?" Mira looked at the groceries, not random junk. Real food, vegetables, rice, whole wheat bread, a few snack packs she recognized as Amara's favorites. She stepped aside without a word. Julian placed the bags on the counter, then handed her the envelope. "What's this?" "Just some info. There's a part-time art teaching job open at a community center near here. Flexible hours. Easy load. They're looking for someone who works well with kids." Mira opened the envelope. A flyer, a printed email thread, and a handwritten note from the program director, addressed to her by name. "I figured you might not want to see me," he said. "You figured right," Mira replied. He nodded. "Can I just leave these here then?" Mira looked at the groceries, not random junk. Real food, vegetables, rice, whole wheat bread, a few snack packs she recognized as Amara's favorites. She stepped aside without a word. Julian placed the bags on the counter, then handed her the envelope. "What's this?" "Just some info. There's a part-time art teaching job open at a community center near here. Flexible hours. Easy load. They're looking for someone who works well with kids." Mira opened the envelope. A flyer, a printed email thread, and a handwritten note from the program director, addressed to her by name. "You asked them about me? I mentioned your name. That's it. You'd have to apply like everyone else." Mira stared at the page. "I haven't taught in years. They don't care. They just want someone real." She looked at him, really looked. His eyes weren't smug, not even hopeful, just tired, honest. "I'm not ready to say thank you," she said. "I'm not asking you to." That night, while Mira washed dishes, Amara sat at the table coloring. She didn't look up when she asked, "Did Julian come back because of me or you?" Mira wiped her hands. "What do you mean?" "He talks to me a lot, but he looks at you more." Mira dried a plate. "I think he came back because we both matter to him. Or maybe he's trying to prove that we do." "Do you want him here?" Mira paused. That was the real question, wasn't it? "I'm still deciding," she said. Amara nodded. "He bought the cheese I like." Mira laughed under her breath. "Yeah, I noticed." That night, Mira sat alone with the sketchbook again. She had drawn Amara's room, the kitchen, the backyard. But every time she tried to draw Julian, her hand froze. Not because she couldn't, but because she wasn't sure what expression to give him. Was he smiling? Was he sorry? Was he waiting? She closed the book. Some things couldn't be sketched yet. Not until she knew which story she was telling. The next morning, Mira stood at the window holding the art center flyer. She looked at Amara, who was brushing her hair and singing off-key in the hallway. She looked at the sketchbook on the table. She looked at the quiet door Julian had knocked on. Then she picked up her phone and dialed the number on the flyer. "Hi," she said. "I'd like to ask about the teaching position. My name's Mira. I used to draw for a living. I'd like to try again." The room smelled like washable markers and construction paper. The walls were covered in crooked crayon drawings and cheerful quotes. The community center had clearly been built on a budget, but the energy inside it was warm, real. Mira stood near the front whiteboard, holding a plastic bin of pencils. It had been 5 years since she'd taught an art class. Her hands were steady, but her chest tightened when the first child raised their hand to ask a question. "Miss Mira, how do you draw water that looks like it's moving?" She leaned over the kid's paper. "You make it soft, not straight lines but ones that curve. Think of water like it's dancing a little." The kid grinned and started over. Mira exhaled quietly. She could still do this. Maybe even better than before. Because now, she wasn't just teaching how to draw. She was teaching how to hold on. Julian didn't text Mira to congratulate her on the new job. He just showed up after class with a thermos of tea. He waited by the center's back exit, leaning against the brick wall like he'd done it before. "You drink peppermint, right?" he asked, holding it out. "I do," she said, accepting it. "But that's not an invitation to stay." "Didn't ask to." She sipped quietly, then surprised herself by asking, "How did you know I'd be out by 5? "I checked the schedule. It's posted online." "You checking up on me now?" "Making sure you're okay." Mira sighed. "You don't have to do that." "I know." They stood in silence for a moment. She didn't tell him to leave. He didn't say anything else. But they stood together, and that was new. That night at dinner, Amara was unwrapping a grilled cheese sandwich Julian had picked up for her. She bit into it, then looked up with a mouthful. "Is Julian your boyfriend?" Mira nearly dropped her fork. "What? I'm just asking. You act weird around him. You never act weird with other people." Mira raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly do you mean by weird?" Amara shrugged. "You clean the kitchen more when he's around. And you wear lip balm. That's new." Mira covered her face with both hands. Amara grinned. "I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying he likes you. Like, more than just bringing us food." Mira stayed quiet for a beat, then said softly, "It's complicated." "Why?" "Because grown-ups don't always trust what they feel, especially when they've been hurt before." Amara nodded, chewing slowly. "He said you used to be friends." "We were." "Do you still like him?" Mira gave a half-smile. "Some days." "Do you think he'll stay this time?" That was the question she didn't have an answer for. Julian stopped by again the next day. He didn't bring flowers or gifts. Just helped carry groceries in. Fixed the dripping kitchen faucet. Showed Amara how to reset the Wi-Fi router. He stayed for dinner. Sat at the edge of the table, never too close. Didn't try to impress. He was just there. After Amara went to bed, he stood to leave. Mira walked him to the door. "You don't have to keep fixing things," she said. He paused, hand on the doorknob. "I'm not doing it to fix anything. I'm just trying to be useful. If that's okay." She nodded. "You're different now," she said. "So are you." "I don't hate you anymore," she added after a long pause. He smiled. "That's something. Old ghosts don't always stay buried." Later that week, Mira got a letter she hadn't expected. It was from her old apartment complex. Unpaid utility bills. A collection notice. She stared at the paper, heart sinking. The trust covered the house, yes. But it didn't erase the mess she left behind. She didn't want Julian to know. But she couldn't hide the way she sat at the kitchen table that evening, hands pressed to her face. Julian noticed the change right away when he stopped by. "Bad day?" he asked gently. "I'm fine." "You sure?" "Just tired." He didn't press. Just set down the groceries and started putting them away. But Amara knew something was off too. She sat beside her mother and slipped a note under her elbow. It read in big block letters, "You can tell us. We're not going anywhere." Mira smiled, barely, but she folded the letter and kept it in her pocket. That night, Julian stayed after Amara went to sleep. Mira sat on the porch. He joined her, the stars scattered above in silence. "I used to think if I could just make enough money, all the hard stuff would go away," he said. "Did it?" "No. It just made me forget what real struggle looked like." Mira looked at him. I didn't need you to be rich, she said. I just needed you to show up. He nodded slowly. I know that now. She sipped her tea. You hurt me, she said plainly. Not because you left, but because you didn't even say goodbye. I couldn't face you. I thought if I became something big enough, I could make it up to you someday. That's the thing, she said, looking right at him. You can't schedule redemption. Julian sat with that, then asked, so what now? Mira didn't answer immediately. Then she said something that felt closer to an invitation than anything else yet. You keep showing up, and we'll see. Later that night, after he'd left, Mira sat at the table. She pulled out the sketchbook. This time, she didn't stop her hand. She drew Julian, not with perfect lines or sharp detail. She drew him sitting on the porch, tea in hand, slightly slouched, human, flawed, quiet. And when she finished, she wrote one sentence under it. He didn't promise forever, but he came back. The morning sun poured through the kitchen window like it finally believed this house was a home. Mira stood barefoot, stirring pancake batter with one hand and holding her phone with the other. Amara was still in pajamas, drawing dinosaurs at the table. It had been quiet lately, not heavy, just steady. Julian hadn't shown up for 2 days. Mira hadn't expected him to, but part of her noticed anyway. She didn't say it aloud, but she missed him. Maybe just the way he filled space without taking it over. Maybe the way he fixed small things without making her feel broken. The door knocked gently just as she flipped the second pancake. Amara jumped up. That's him. Mira raised an eyebrow. How do you know? I just do. She was right. Julian stood there with a paper bag in one hand and a coffee in the other. You guys eat breakfast like regular people or still surviving off toast ends? Mira smiled despite herself. You're late. We've already evolved to pancakes. They ate together. Julian helped clear the plates. Amara talked nonstop about a lizard she saw at school that week. Mira listened, amused. It felt like something real. But Mira kept catching herself, watching Julian too closely, expecting him to flinch, to disappear, to say something that would snap the balance. It didn't come until later that afternoon. After lunch, Amara ran outside to the tiny garden patch to check on her imaginary carrots. Julian stayed behind while Mira sorted through an old box she'd kept sealed since the apartment move. Bills, receipts, folded letters, fragments of a life she'd been trying to outgrow. At the bottom, she found a photo she hadn't seen in years. Her and Julian, younger, smiling, standing in front of the corner store where they used to buy instant noodles. He had his arm around her shoulders. She had a look in her eyes that hadn't returned since. She didn't realize she was staring until Julian walked over. He saw the photo and froze. I remember that day, he said. We argued about pineapple on pizza. Mira didn't smile. You look happy, he said. I was, she replied quietly. And then I wasn't. Julian looked down. I never meant to become the person who made you stop trusting people. But you did. He didn't argue. She placed the photo down and looked at him directly. If Amara wasn't here, would you have come back? Julian blinked. What do you mean? If I didn't have a daughter, if this was just about me, would you still have stayed? He hesitated. Not out of guilt, but because he knew the weight of the answer. I don't know, he said finally. I want to say yes, but I think part of me needed to see her to understand what I ruined. Mira nodded slowly. Her face didn't change, but something in her eyes closed a little. I appreciate the honesty, she said, even if it hurts. I'm not here out of pity, Julian said quickly. Or guilt. Not anymore. I'm here because you matter. And she matters. I just didn't know how much until I saw it. She didn't reply. Not right away. And that silence was louder than anything else in the room. That night, Amara refused to eat dinner. Not because she wasn't hungry, because she'd heard them. Kids always hear more than you think. She sat on the floor in her room, drawing angry lightning bolts in red crayon. Julian knocked once, then stepped inside. Hey, he said, sitting beside her. That storm looks serious. She shrugged. Want to talk about it? She looked up. Her lip trembled. Are you going to leave again? Julian blinked. No, I'm not. But Mom's sad. She doesn't believe you'll stay. He looked at the red marks on the page. I made her sad before. That's true. But I'm trying to do better now. She thinks she's protecting me, Amara said. But sometimes she's just scared. Julian nodded. I know. And I don't want you to fix that. That's my job. He leaned over and pointed at the crayon in her hand. Let's draw the next page. Make it something brighter. She hesitated, then drew a sun, crooked and big. Later that night, after Amara fell asleep, Mira sat on the back porch alone. The sky was cloudy. It smelled like distant rain. Julian opened the door, stood there. I don't want to be the reason she feels like she has to guess what tomorrow looks like, he said. She doesn't blame you, Mira replied. But she watches you. And you don't believe in me yet. I don't know how, she admitted. It's easier to prepare for pain than expect something good. I'm not asking for your trust all at once. She looked at him. What are you asking for then? He stepped out, sat next to her. Just a real chance. Mira stayed quiet, then said, I drew you. In my sketchbook. He smiled faintly. Did I look heroic? No, she said. You looked tired. But you looked like you weren't leaving. Julian stood to leave. But this time Mira didn't let him go all the way. Stay for tea, she asked. He turned. You sure? I'm not, she said honestly. But I'm trying. He walked back in. She filled 2 mugs. The rain never came. But the quiet felt safe. The job at the community center wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Mira got used to the smell of dry markers on her fingertips and the constant background noise of kids who couldn't sit still. She'd started staying after class to help clean up. Not because she had to, but because it felt good. She'd forgotten how satisfying it was to lock up a space you helped build. Even just for the afternoon. One of the parents offered to pay her privately for tutoring. Another asked if she could paint a mural at the local library. She wasn't rich, far from it. But for the first time in years, Mira didn't feel like she was scrambling just to breathe. She wasn't surviving. She was rebuilding. And that was a harder skill than anyone ever tells you. Meanwhile, Julian had been keeping his phone on silent more than usual. But silence doesn't stop the real world from chasing you. His assistant, Liv, texted daily. Press is asking about your disappearance. Investors want an update. You've been out of the office for 3 weeks. Board meeting next Friday, they expect you there. Are you okay? He was, but not in the way they meant. For the first time in a decade, he wasn't managing people, money, meetings, or chaos. He was walking kids to the carpool line, fixing light bulbs, reading bedtime stories. And it scared him, because he didn't know how long this version of life would last. That IT was a Friday night when it cracked. Mira had cooked something warm, lentil soup with soft bread, and invited Julian to stay. The table was set. Amara was already halfway through a story about school. Julian had just started his second bowl when his phone buzzed. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. Mira noticed. You can take it, she said without judgment. I don't want to. She raised an eyebrow. Is something wrong? He hesitated, then pulled the phone out. Multiple texts. One from a board member. CEO missing. Media catching on. We need a statement. Now. He stared at it, then locked the screen again. Amara was humming to herself, but Myra's eyes were fixed on him. You have another life, she said gently. I don't want that life anymore. You can't pretend it never existed. He didn't answer, because she was right. Later that night, after Amara went to bed, Julian stood by the sink while Mira dried dishes. Maybe I should go to the city next week, he said quietly. Just to handle things. Wrap stuff up. You don't need my permission, Mira replied. It's not about permission. She looked at him. So what is it? I'm scared, he said, of going back and losing this. Mira folded the dish towel. Then don't lose it. That's easy to say now, he said. But the second I'm back in that office, they'll expect the old me. Then decide who you want to be before you go. He leaned against the counter. What if I'm not strong enough to be both? Myra's voice was steady. Then don't come back unless you're sure. Silence. Sharp. Not angry, just honest. Julian nodded. I don't want to hurt you again. Then don't. The next morning, Julian packed a small bag. He didn't say goodbye like it was forever. He said it like he was going to the store. But Amara looked at him differently. Is this the kind of trip where people come back? She asked. He knelt beside her. I'm not leaving, he said. I'm stepping away so I can return with the right things in place. She nodded slowly. Can I draw you something for your bag? He smiled. Only if it's something lucky. She gave him a sheet of folded paper, a drawing of their house, and next to it, 3 stick figures holding hands. He didn't open it until he got to the train station. It made his chest ache. That night, Mira folded laundry alone while the TV played quietly in the background. The house felt too quiet, not in a painful way, but in a hollow one. She wasn't afraid he'd stay gone forever, but the emptiness reminded her of before, of how easy it is for gone to feel permanent. She picked up her sketchbook and flipped through the pages. Every one of them felt like evidence that she'd started opening doors again. She wondered if she was stupid for doing it. But then she heard Amara humming in her sleep, soft, safe, sure. That sound was enough. 3 days later, Mira opened Julian's laptop to look for a photo Amara wanted to print. He'd left it logged in on the table. A new email flashed at the corner. She didn't mean to click it, but it opened anyway. From a company executive. Glad to hear you're rejoining the team. This comeback will be a PR win. We'll position you as a hero who took time off to save a life. The board's thrilled. She read it twice, then closed the screen, and sat there, staring at the wall. Not because of what it said, but because she didn't know if he'd tell her. Mira didn't mention the email. Not at first. She didn't want to be that woman. The one who snooped, assumed, jumped to conclusions. But the words circled in her mind like loose threads she couldn't pull tight. We'll position you as a hero. The board's thrilled. She wasn't angry because he went back to work. She was angry because he didn't say he was stepping back into the spotlight, using their pain as a part of the pitch. It made her feel like a chapter in his comeback story. And she wasn't sure she could live like that again. Every night since Julian left, Amara set out a 3rd plate at dinner. I know he's not here, she told her mom. But if we save his spot, maybe he'll come back faster. Mira didn't argue. She just added an extra spoon and made enough for 3. But her smile faded quicker each night. Because Amara wasn't saving a plate. She was saving hope that it was day 5 when Julian came back. He didn't send a text. Didn't call. He just showed up at the door like nothing had changed. Except everything had. Mira opened the door slowly. He looked tired. Not in a dramatic movie star way. In a human way, bags under his eyes, hair messy, suit jacket wrinkled from hours of travel. You're early, she said. Couldn't stay away, he replied. She didn't smile. He noticed. Mira didn't speak right away. She let him settle on the porch bench. She handed him tea, out of habit, not warmth. Then she sat across from him, knees close, words careful. I saw the email. Julian didn't pretend not to know. I didn't write the pitch. That was their wording. But you didn't correct it. He sighed. I didn't want to lose my place there either. And what's your place here? The question hung in the air longer than it needed to. I'm trying to find out, he said. Mira nodded. That's not enough anymore. Julian leaned forward. You once told me I disappeared because I didn't know how to stay. You were right. I thought success was distance. That the more I climbed, the more I had to leave behind. I've spent the last month realizing something worse than leaving, staying with one foot out the door. I don't want to split my life between being here and being important somewhere else. I want to belong in one place. And I want it to be with you too. If you'll let me. Mira watched him closely. Even if you're not the hero? He nodded. Especially if I'm not. That night, Amara came home from school and found Julian sitting on the couch. She didn't run to him. She walked up quietly and stood in front of him with her arms crossed. You missed grilled cheese night. I know. We had the good cheese. I deserve that punishment. She stared at him. You coming back for real? Or just saying stuff again? Julian leaned forward and offered her a folded paper. She opened it. It was a drawing. The house. The garden. Her. Her mom. And him. This time all holding hands. Below it, one sentence. Not leaving unless you tell me to. She smiled for the first time in days. Then sat next to him. Later that evening, Julian helped wash the dishes. Mira dried them. They worked quietly, side by side. Halfway through, she said, I turned down a painting gig yesterday. Why? Because I wasn't sure if I'd be here long enough to finish it. Julian stopped scrubbing. You planning to leave? She shook her head. No. I'm planning to say yes next time. He exhaled. She looked at him. This is a small life. I don't have big plans or grand dreams anymore. I like small, he said. It's harder to fake. A week later, Mira bought a can of yellow paint. She didn't ask for help. She just started brushing it across the kitchen wall one Saturday morning. Music playing softly, Amara dancing around in socks. Julian reading a recipe he didn't understand. By the time they finished, the whole place smelled like something new, something fresh but rooted. Amara looked around and grinned. Now it's real. Mira looked at Julian. And for the first time, she believed that maybe it could be. 1 month later, Mira had her first art class with a waitlist. Amara had a sunflower sprouting in the backyard. Julian turned down a major CEO offer in the city and accepted a consultant role from home. No headlines. No news articles. No PR strategy. Just quiet mornings, warm food, and slow trust. Mira stood at the window one evening, watching Julian teach Amara how to check soil moisture with her finger. She didn't feel fear anymore when she saw him there. She just felt home. Not all broken things need to be fixed to be beautiful. Some just need people who won't walk away.